thoughts at 719-247-1313. What we got on the docket tonight, both the Nuggets and the Avs are in action. You can hear the latter coming up tonight as the Avs take on the Calgary Flames. Nuggets will be in action against the Orlando Magic, and the Nuggets are where I want to start. Because the NBA trade deadline has come and gone, and it should not be a surprise that the Denver Nuggets did nothing. If you've been listening to the show, you know how unlikely it was that the Denver Nuggets would do anything. And of course, you had Michael Malone the other day quite emphatic about the team not trading Michael Porter, and he was one of the very, very few people, maybe really the only one, right? Nikola Jokic, they're not going to trade because he's Nikola Jokic. That I feel even like it's not necessary for me to even say that. You know that. Outside of Jokic, Porter's the only tradable asset that they have. And Michael Malone was quite emphatic the other night that they're not going to trade Michael Porter. So you are left with Nuggets probably aren't going to do anything. And I think that most fans are smart enough to not be you got to make a move just to make a move. Okay? Because I'll talk about a team that did that. Golden State did that. Made a move just to make a move. Didn't care about whether it made the team better or worse, whether it was a fit, whether it would burn their entire organization to the ground. They made a move just to make a move. And I think most Nuggets fans were smart enough to understand that that's not what the Nuggets need to do. And I think that if the NBA trade deadline came and went today at 1 o'clock and the Nuggets did nothing, there would be disappointment. Certainly. But I think it would be easier to get over. In a world where the Brandon Ingram trade did not happen last night. The worst thing to happen to Calvin Booth in this trade deadline is not even Luka going to the Lakers. It is Brandon Ingram going to the Toronto Raptors. Allow me to explain. Brandon Ingram, who was, by the way, in the house last night as the Denver Nuggets boat raced the Pelicans for the second consecutive game. And perhaps you don't feel too bad about the Nuggets keeping Michael Porter given the fact that he's gone berserker the last two games. But Brandon Ingram was in the house last night, and then he wasn't. He was sitting on the bench because he's hurt, and then at some point got up, left the building because he got traded to the Toronto Raptors. The return for Brandon Ingram included the Nuggets' old friend Bruce Brown. So here you have one of the players that the Nuggets have lost over the last couple of years that has in some way contributed to this team's slowly declining, that now is getting traded. Essentially, his role in all of this is to make the salaries work. He is an obvious buyout candidate. If Bruce Brown doesn't get traded to the New Orleans Pelicans, I think there is a very different feeling around the Nuggets' lack of activity. I shouldn't say lack. They have none. No activity at the trade deadline. But because Bruce Brown is probably going to get bought out, And the Denver Nuggets would have to dump salary in order to get Bruce Brown. The fact that they did nothing means that if Bruce Brown gets bought out by the New Orleans Pelicans, he's not coming to Denver. The Nuggets cannot get him. I won't bore you with the details. They can't get him. So the worst thing to happen to Calvin Booth, because he was already bracing for a lot of criticism, a lot of groans, a lot of eye rolls, maybe a torch or a pitchfork or two. But more than likely, this was going to be a team that would be going the buyout market route. Right? If you're someone that wanted to trade Michael Porter for two lesser players, then you and I have a difference of opinion. But it was most likely that the Denver Nuggets were going to have to go into the buyout market. But in order to do that, they had to get rid of somebody. They have no second-round picks. That's why they lost Jonas Valanciunas yesterday. Jonas Valanciunas gets traded to the Kings. And in the reporting, it says that Denver was trying to get him. What ultimately made the difference? Second-round picks, which the Nuggets have none. And they used a couple of them to dump Reggie Jackson. But I brought up Ben Simmons in the buyout market, and people laughed at me, which is fine. But that's the type of player that the Denver Nuggets realistically could add that might actually improve their team, because trading Michael Porter to Atlanta for Bogdan Bogdanovic and DeAndre Hunter, who both were on the move today, by the way. Bogdanovic to the Clippers, which probably is not sitting well with many Nuggets fans. But that doesn't make them better. They're not a better basketball team if they do that. And me trying to concoct a way for the Denver Nuggets to essentially swap Michael Porter for Kevin Durant, admittedly, was a little pie in the sky. So what you are realistically left with is the buyout market. And last night, it looked like Bruce Brown, key member of the Denver Nuggets championship team, was going to be available. And yet Calvin Booth could not do any piece of business to free up the roster spot needed and the money needed to sign Bruce Brown for pennies on the dollar. If Bruce Brown doesn't get traded last night, I think the anger isn't as high that you may be feeling right now as a Nuggets fan. Still be high, still be angry. But the worst thing that happened to Calvin Booth last night was that Bruce Brown got traded to a bad team that will most likely buy him out. But this is the situation that the Denver Nuggets have found themselves in. You know, I was talking to somebody about this just about an hour or so ago. You know, Calvin Booth, because he asked me, you know, what's the feeling with Calvin Booth? Like, do fans like him? Whatever. You know, Calvin Booth as a general manager was kind of born on third base. Right? Tim Connolly was the man who toiled and waited and drafted and developed and put together the core four of a championship team. Tim Connolly got Michael Porter. He got Nikola Jokic. He got Jamal Murray. He got Aaron Gordon. And he left for Minnesota, and all Calvin Booth had to do was bring it home. And he did, to his credit. But he was starting on third base. He gets Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The Nuggets win a title. Calvin Booth is showered with praise. But then right after that came the hard part. Came the part where Calvin Booth could put his stamp on the Denver Nuggets. And his stamp is losing Bruce Brown, losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, extending Zeke Naji, signing Dario Saric, who, by the way, the Nuggets beat the Pelicans last night by 30. Only one Denver Nugget did not step foot on that court, and his name was Dario Saric. So Calvin Booth started on third base with the Denver Nuggets, brought it home. They won a championship. Then his job got much harder, and he has been making poor decision after poor decision and continues to box the Nuggets into a corner. So the team that they entered the trade deadline with is the team they're going to finish out this season with. No moves, no changes whatsoever. And then comes the summer, and this is what I said it was going to, all roads were pointing to this. The Denver Nuggets' future is, to me, quite simple. If playoff Jamal shows up, all very well could be right with the world. And we may look back and say, man, we really got caught up in this 82-game season, the trade deadline. Oh, Zeke Naji's contract, Dario Saric isn't playing. We got caught up in all this stuff. Playoff Jamal showed up, and everything was good. And if playoff Jamal doesn't show up, or if he only lasts one round of the playoffs like he did last year, then Calvin Booth will have, unlike this trade deadline, no shortage of different directions. He could trade Gordon. He can trade Porter. He could trade Murray. He could trade Nikola Jokic. I understand the restraints that he was under. Many of them were self-imposed through his own mistakes, and he has to own them. But I think the Nuggets' direction, what they are going to do this summer, has everything to do with playoff Jamal. And just in case you're wondering, playoff Jamal did not make an appearance last night. Jamal Murray, in a game where everybody got in on the act, Michael Porter went off again. Jamal Murray was 5 of 7 from the field. 5 of 7, 10 points. Didn't show up last night. Playoff Jamal. Gonna have to wait for the playoffs. And if he shows up, Nuggets could very well make the NBA Finals, and I don't think the consternation will be nearly what it is right now. But if they don't, if that guy doesn't show up, and this team exits the playoffs early, I believe Calvin Booth has a contract that is coming up. This is going to be a reckoning of an offseason for the Denver Nuggets. Because Calvin Booth could do nothing to improve this basketball team. A basketball team that you just have to watch on a nightly basis and know something is not quite right. So the Nuggets sit out of the NBA trade deadline. Other things were done. Many other teams did things, some of them very good. Some of them, well, let's talk about the Golden State Warriors coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. So the Denver Nuggets do nothing at the trade deadline, which I will say this, because Michael Malone and Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette did a really good job asking Michael Malone last night the same question he asked to Nikola Jokic a couple of days ago, which was, do you feel like you have all the pieces to win a title? And Michael Malone wasn't quite as concise as Nikola Jokic, but essentially was getting around to the same thing. He said, I believe in this group. He brought up injuries. You know, Aaron Gordon has missed some time. Okay, fair or unfair. I think that there are some issues that even Michael Malone would acknowledge could not be necessarily chalked up to injuries. They are issues with roster construction. But for once, he didn't take a shot at Calvin Booth. I thought he gave the correct political answer. Well, still, I know that he believes in this core group of players, right? That's never been the issue. He's always believed in Porter and Murray and Gordon and Jokic, and he loves Westbrook. He likes Peyton Watson. Outside of that, I don't know. I don't know how he feels about the rest of them. But the core group of Denver Nuggets, I know Michael Malone is very confident in. But, alas, my point is, don't fall for any of this spin that may come out of the Denver Nuggets over the next few days. Right? If Calvin Booth meets with the media, you're probably going to hear something to the effect of, we like what we have, we believe in our group, we didn't want to make a move. That's not, I don't believe that, not for a second. They wanted to. They couldn't. They just flat out couldn't. And there's criticism, warranted criticism in that. Because their main justification for allowing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to walk is that they would have flexibility. And yet, in a trade deadline that was absolutely bonkers, where everybody seemed to make a move, the Denver Nuggets did not. I mean, for Pete's sake, the Milwaukee Bucks did something. They got Kyle Kuzma. I don't know if it makes them better, but they did something. So don't tell me that Calvin Booth is just sitting there as the rest of the league is swapping players and go, no, we don't need to do anything. Of course he wanted to do something. He couldn't. And by the way, if the something that was available to them was trading Michael Porter for two lesser basketball players for the sake of depth, I would have been just as critical. So I know they had to thread the needle here. But why did you have to thread the needle? Not because you're paying Michael Porter. No, it's because you paid Zeke Naji. It's because none of these young players have enough value to trade for anything significant. You don't have any draft picks. That's all stuff that Calvin Booth did. So he had to thread the needle on this trade deadline because through his own fault. So I'm not. You can criticize Calvin Booth, but you got to also understand the reality of the situation, that it was highly unlikely they were going to be able to do anything. Lots of teams made moves. Nothing, no sequel to the Luka trade. I would say there was nothing even close to what the Luka trade was. Kevin Durant on the move would have been that. It wouldn't have been like the Luka deal, but it would be a fitting sequel, right? Not as good as the first one, but significant. But Phoenix, alas, could not figure out how to acquire Jimmy Butler. So the Golden State Warriors did. Phoenix was trying to get Jimmy Butler. The Warriors were trying to get Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant uninterested in going back to Golden State. So Golden State's like, hey, Miami, why don't we do something? So let's also keep in perspective the Nuggets' inactivity by looking at some of the other moves and deciding, is there a worse fate than the one the Nuggets received at 1 o'clock today when they did nothing? Is the Warriors adding Jimmy Butler better than the Nuggets doing nothing, worse than the Nuggets doing nothing, or the same as the Nuggets doing nothing? I will say it's worse. And look, Jimmy Butler's not going to go into Golden State and immediately torch the place, okay? If you think that, then you haven't been following the career of Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is going to be on his absolute best behavior because he's not in Miami and he got paid. He will be on his bestest behavior. The Golden State Warriors will see an uptick. I think that the Warriors moving forward this season will win a few more games. They are not a championship contender. They will not advance far in the playoffs. Essentially, what adding Jimmy Butler does in right now is maybe get the Golden State Warriors out of the play-in. A team that would be very susceptible to getting bounced in the play-in will now probably get out of it. That's how much Jimmy Butler moves the needle for the Golden State Warriors. Anything beyond that, no. Kevin Durant would have been a different story, which is why the Golden State Warriors were more interested in Durant than they were Jimmy Butler. So short term, Jimmy's going to be on his best behavior. Draymond's going to be on his best behavior. Everybody is going to sing Kumbaya and it'll be all good. And the Warriors will be a marginally better team moving forward this season. But there will come a day, and it will not be too far into the future, where Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green do not see eye to eye, where Jimmy Butler is not pleased with the fact that for maybe the first time in his career, he's not the man. Steph is. And if you believe reporting coming out of the NBA, part of the reason why Kevin Durant didn't want to go back to Golden State is because he didn't really want to live in Steph Curry's shadow again. Jimmy Butler will not like it in Golden State. That $100+ million extension that he received is only going to buy his happiness for maybe the remainder of this season. He will be upset that nobody really cares about him. And he will play at least second fiddle to Steph, if not third fiddle to Steph and Draymond. He'll get disgruntled. And the Warriors will go down in flames. And that will be the real end. The Golden State Warriors dynasty is over, right? That's been over. But this Warriors franchise will be burned to the ground and they will start over. Steph will be gone, Draymond will be gone, Jimmy Butler will be gone, and they'll start over with Brandon Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga. But this move, this is the most desperate move of any team at the deadline. Because Jimmy Butler is not even a basketball fit with the Golden State Warriors. His game doesn't fit the Golden State Warriors. They like to move the ball around. Jimmy Butler likes to have the basketball. It sticks to him. He doesn't even fit what the Warriors want to do. And then add on top of it the fact that he's a malcontent, and he's a malcontent that has never not had the spotlight wherever he's been. And he's on a team with another explosive personality in Draymond Green. You wonder why Steve Kerr was walking around like somebody kicked his dog last night? This is why. Because he's got to be a psychologist more than a basketball coach for this motley crew he's got together at Golden State. So adding something that will ultimately ruin your team is certainly not preferable to just doing nothing. Right? The Nuggets culture is good. They are a good basketball team. They're a much better basketball team than the Golden State Warriors. So just to put in perspective that teams are making moves that are actively ruining their franchise, to say nothing of the team located in the heart of Texas. I don't know if they're right in the heart. They may be in the throat area. I'm not great with geography, but Dallas, right? Everything about the Luka trade has kind of got to be said itself. No move that was going to be made was going to be as earth-shattering as that. And Dallas needs to be in a separate class all by themselves in terms of incompetence. But taking that trade out of it, the Golden State Warriors did the worst thing of any NBA team this trade deadline. It'll seem okay for a little bit. Don't fall for it, because that thing it's not going to be much better from a basketball perspective, and it's going to get really bad really quickly. 719-24-7-1313. More on the NBA trade deadline. The Lakers do indeed get their big man. So how seriously do they need to be taken as a title contender right now? Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. The NBA trade deadline has come and gone. And according to Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette, I'll rely on him for mathing because it's never my strong suit. Nuggets, one of 4 teams that did not make a move. And as he points out on X, the Nuggets will then, in order to participate in the buyout market, would have to waive a player, and they would still adhere to the first apron rules when it comes to participating in the buyout market. Rather than get in depth on what that means, just know that it is highly unlikely, if not impossible, for them to get Bruce Brown if he doesn't get bought out by the New Orleans Pelicans. I did see Ben Simmons working on a buyout with the Nets. All of it for not Chris Middleton. Does he get bought out by the Wizards? Doesn't matter. Who the Nuggets are right now is who they're going to be. And where does that team lie in the pecking order? It's interesting last night, the trade that the Lakers made in getting Mark Williams, who, if I told you that name, you went, who? I don't blame you. That's what I did initially. When I heard the trade that the Lakers made, I'm like, wait, you mean Grant Williams? The Williams that the Charlotte Hornet, and then I was like, oh, the Hornets guy. It's interesting that that's the type of big man they get. Because he is young. And he is a projectable player. When I said the other day, watch the Lakers get a big man and how serious of a contender they become after that move. This is kind of an in-between. Like, they do get their big man. But if it was a Miles Turner or Jakob Poeltl, then it's like, okay, it's a big man, but it's a veteran. With this guy, he's younger. He still fills the same role. He's a player that fits in with the post-LeBron Lakers more than the LeBron Lakers. He is somebody that can grow with the Luka era in Los Angeles. But he's not the known commodity to where it wasn't the direction that I thought that the Lakers would go. And I say that I'm sure Rob Pelinka did look at the veteran big man market. But perhaps there was a sense across the league, nobody help him. And Jakob Poeltl's team added, they got Brandon Ingram. So Masai Ujiri, our old friend, not giving up Jakob Poeltl. He thinks that the Raptors can be pretty good as soon as next year. So he's not giving up Jakob Poeltl. They've been trying the Miles Turner route for 2 years. Weren't ever able to get that done. So I'm sure a lot of different avenues for more proven big men were closed to the Los Angeles Lakers. So it does create an interesting situation because, yes, they got their big man. Yes, he's a rim protector. Nikola Jokic would kill him. like figuratively in the basketball sense. Like, have you watched a Nuggets game against the Charlotte Hornets? And maybe they put him off the ball and they put Rui on the ball, but we've seen the Jokic versus Rui situation before. Like, I like him as a player, and I think he could be really interesting moving forward for the Lakers, who have some guys under contract that will be around long after LeBron is gone. Like, Luka's Lakers are coming more together. And by the way, they give up Dalton Connect to get their big man, which I think the Lakers would kind of hate to lose him. But after you get Luka Doncic, you have no room to complain. And anything that the Lakers do, you should just say that you have Luka Doncic and be okay with it. But they trade Dalton Connect. He's a little redundant with Austin Reeves. And then they get this young player who's actually younger than Dalton Connect. For comparison, he's younger than Dalton Connect. And they bring him in. So it's because you have LeBron and Luka, you're automatically in a conversation of the next tier. Right? A team that not everybody universally agrees can win a title, but maybe some people do, most people don't, but kind of in that next group, just with Luka and LeBron alone. And now you add this player, and it's like, I don't know if that really, it certainly fills the hole on that roster, so they have someone to actually play that position, but is this dude ready for the Western Conference playoffs? He's been playing in Charlotte. So I don't know quite what to make of the Lakers. And I don't know that a lot of people do either. I mean, I don't know that I would want to match up with Luka and LeBron. I'd let them be somebody else's problem. But I don't know that you can really take the Lakers this year seriously to be a champion. And let's not forget, using the same logic I have been applying to the Colorado Avalanche and why I am doubting their Stanley Cup chances, to make a move like they did to completely change their franchise, it's probably not going to happen. That was already there. It's probably not going to happen that the Lakers were going to win a title. I'm pretty confident in that. But where are they? Is it, well, they're not going to win because OKC, or they're not going to win because Denver and OKC? I mean, how far the pecking order do you put this Los Angeles Lakers team that we have yet to even see Luka and LeBron together on the court? We will this weekend, which can't wait to see the number of people to tune in to that game. I think they'd play the Pacers. So I was just kind of putting this together now that the trade deadline is up. I think there is a group of 5 teams that you have to take seriously in the West. Oklahoma City, Denver, Lakers, Mavericks, and Grizzlies. I think you have to take those teams seriously. You can't completely dismiss any of them. Dallas and LA, because of the move that they made, I don't know in the Western Conference how I could justify either one of those teams making it out, which is kind of okay if you're the Lakers. It's definitely not okay if you're the Mavericks. One of those two teams really needs to get out of the West this year, and it's not the Lakers. But I think those 5 teams you have to take seriously. You may like one more than another, but they're all serious teams. And so, like Houston, I like where they're going, but it's too early. Minnesota is worse. And the one thing I'll say is, as long as the Nuggets don't run into Minnesota, I think they'll be okay. But I don't think Minnesota has what it takes to be taken seriously. They have taken a significant step back after the success they achieved last season and, of course, their own big move. I don't think you could take the Clippers seriously. Sacramento, Phoenix, Golden State. I don't think you need to take any of those teams seriously. And then you got one team in San Antonio that's on the rise, and watch how quickly they move up the standings. They're going to be an interesting first-round opponent for somebody because De'Aaron Fox made his debut last night and looked pretty dang good. So I'm buying future stock in San Antonio. Already was because of Wemby, but now you add De'Aaron Fox, they could get good in a hurry. But OKC, Denver, LA, Dallas, Memphis, I think are the teams you take seriously. Put aside the Lakers and the Mavericks because the idea that they're going to make it all come together and work to the level they needed to right now to get out of the West, I don't see it happening. And this is what the Nuggets are banking on because they have no other choice, right? Because of the way their roster is constructed, leaving them no ability to do anything to make this team better. At the trade deadline, they had to bank on teams not getting good enough. There's already Oklahoma City, right? There's already Oklahoma City. If John Moran is healthy, certainly Memphis is there. But if you're the Nuggets, you're kind of looking at it like that's kind of the group. I think the Lakers could be a tough out. I think Nikola Jokic's life will be made a little bit more difficult if they were to match up with the Dallas Mavericks because of the plethora of big men that they can throw at him. And you'll hear this. This will be part of the spin. The people who have marching orders, perhaps, or feel it's in their best interest to hold water for the franchise will tell you that, hey, who got so much better in the West that you feel infinitely different about the Denver Nuggets' chances than you did 48 hours ago, right? And the one exception is going to be either Dallas or LA. But nothing the Kings did changes anything. Nothing the Warriors did changes anything. So what the Nuggets will say and what they are banking on is that no one was able to make themselves so much better that they'd have to worry about more teams than they did a week ago. Some matchups along the way are going to be more interesting. They're going to be a little bit more different. But I don't know that the landscape has changed that dramatically for this year. The Western Conference going forward is, changed infinitely because of the Luka Doncic trade. But for this year, I still think the Nuggets' path remains the same. Avoid Minnesota if you can help it. And then try to figure out Oklahoma City if you are fortunate enough to get there. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. Looking at all these moves that were made, there's a lot of moving deck chairs on the Titanic. There's obviously the Luka AD trade that is in its own stratosphere. There's a team like the Warriors that did something out of pure desperation that will absolutely backfire on them. You know, the team that had maybe the most important acquisition over the last week, not named the Los Angeles Lakers? It's the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I think they made a minor move. Did they get Tice or gave up Tice? They made a very, very minor move. What I'm talking about is the fact that Chet is healthy. Yes, Oklahoma City has been doing everything they're doing, having the best record in the NBA. They haven't had Chet Holmgren for a while, and now he's back. So looking at the acquisitions outside of Luka, Oklahoma City may have gotten the most significant upgrade to their basketball team. And it was the guy that they already had on the roster just by getting Chet Holmgren back. The Thunder may be even more formidable than they have been over the last few weeks when Shea's putting up 50 points every single game. But here we go, right? We'll get a few buyouts and we'll see. Some guys may end up in some interesting places, but you can kind of look at the West and evaluate. Don't you kind of think that the Nuggets path is still kind of the Nuggets path? I don't know that anybody has jumped them. But but the more important question is how you feel about that path and how likely they are to get to the end of it. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, now that the trade deadline is over, does that mean we have to start talking about the Super Bowl? Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Thursday. Ryan Kaufman with you. You can watch the show live on a daily basis, as many of you are, on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, or if you follow me on X or on Instagram at Gingerly Tweets on X, at Kaufman Sports on Instagram. You can watch the show there as well. So what a wild week it has been. And it has nothing to do with football. Nothing. What we have here is Adam Silver's great revenge over Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell comes in and he takes Christmas away from the NBA. You can't even have your own special day anymore. That's ours now, too. And the NBA came back and they said, you know, your crown jewel, you know, this week that you love so much, and all those media members gather in the city you're hosting the Super Bowl and talk incessantly about every granular detail about your game coming up. Nope. We're taking that from you. The NBA has completely hijacked Super Bowl week. And only through the power of Luka Doncic. Right? Because this would not be the case if this was a normal trade deadline week. Yes, we would get some big names that are being rumored, right? Kevin Durant's name, I'm sure, would be out there. There would be some sort of LeBron question. Like, there would be some topics. But only one of the most significant trades in the history of that league could make the crown jewel week of the NFL irrelevant. And yes, the people down on, you listen to the national shows that lead up to mine during the day. They're in New Orleans. They're broadcasting. Obviously, they're going to talk about football. They get a lot of football players on. But even today, I saw Myles Garrett was asked, how would you put the Luka trade into football terms? And he said Josh Allen for Chris Jones. Pretty good one. But the NBA has completely taken this week from the NFL. Now, tomorrow will be very heavy football, but it's Friday. Some people are already off to the weekend. That's not a banner day in the week for the media, for listening, for viewing. So the NFL is essentially, of its biggest week, most important week. Think of the last 2 weeks, actually, if you really want to put it together. Last week was all about conspiracies of the league being fixed, right? Most people rightly dispelling them, but still the conversation was about, is the NFL rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs? Not a great topic of conversation for the NFL. There comes a point where some publicity can be actually bad publicity. And I think that was last week. And then you get this week, it's all been about the NBA. And the only football questions that are being asked, is the league rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs? It's quite remarkable what has happened. Other than mentioning the Super Bowl, I haven't talked about the Super Bowl at all this week. I've talked football. And I get it. I'm a local show, so I'm not going to spend wall-to-wall 3 hours on Chiefs Eagles. But in years past, I'd be talking about the Super Bowl at least one segment a day all week. Why? Why would I do that? So the NBA has completely hijacked the most important week of the season for the NFL. Now, NBA is not going to take Sunday from them. So I don't know if it's an even trade here that the NBA takes a week of hype away from the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl actually takes a day of games away from the NBA. But I didn't think there would ever be a scenario in which the NBA would be the biggest story of an entire Super Bowl week, but it absolutely has been. And I actually think it's for the best. It's hard to separate the impact of the Luka Doncic trade on this Super Bowl week, but I'm going to try to. This Super Bowl might have, and this is where I reach out to you Gen Zers, the least amount of aura of any Super Bowl that I can remember in recent years. No buzz, no juice. Not the excitement that normally comes. Like Bengals Rams. Like if you were to think of a matchup just hearing it where you're like, it would be Bengals Rams. That wasn't that long ago. The excitement for that game was way more than this one. And again, Luka has a lot to do with it. But I'm trying to imagine what the week would be without the Luka trade. And I think some of my perception about this Super Bowl would still hold true. I mean, we talk about it because it would be the thing to talk about. But there's just no juice to this. There's no excitement. And when it comes to football, we get excited about every little stupid thing. And I say stupid as a term of endearment because I get it. I get caught up in it too. We're breaking down 6th and 7th round selections the Monday after the NFL draft. We get hyped about the schedule. The schedule is the perfect example. Just we already know which games our teams are going to play, but now we get to see them in order. And we freak out. I freak out. You freak out. We talk about it. It's what we do. Not ashamed of it. But that's the power that the NFL has. That we care. We legitimately care. We're not just making this stuff up. Like, we legitimately care. The first game that Bo Nix is going to play in the NFL. When are the Steelers on the schedule? Do they have, who are they playing before the bye week? Who are they playing after the bye week? Like, we legitimately care about these things. We get excited about everything. We get hyped about everything. And the emotion doesn't always have to be a positive one. And that's my point here. Like, yes, there is a bit of anger over the Chiefs getting back to a Super Bowl. Right? I understand that. But that anger is part of what adds to the feeling of Super Bowl week. Like, all these people are so mad they want to see the Chiefs lose and finally get their comeuppance. That adds to the excitement. I'm not talking positive or negative. I'm talking about, like, it's almost apathy. What we're feeling towards this Super Bowl. And I have to extricate myself a little bit from this conversation and say I'm an exception, as I'm sure the city of Philadelphia and the city of Kansas City are. But I'm saying as a whole, there just isn't that same feeling. It's Luka. But if I can since this week has been about basketball, allow me to make a basketball analogy. Okay? Chiefs fatigue is real. It's a real thing. So is Patriot fatigue. So is Golden State Warriors fatigue. I'm sure people were pretty darn tired of the New York Islanders winning championship after championship after championship. I'm sure people were a little bit. I would say the dynasty that had the least fatigue was probably the Bulls dynasty. But even I'm sure some people were tired of seeing the Bulls. And maybe why there wasn't as much Bulls fatigue is because halfway through it, Michael Jordan walked away. Right? So they had a break. So that's probably more the reason why more people didn't get fatigued over the Chicago Bulls. Chiefs fatigue is a real thing. But so was Golden State Warrior fatigue. People were tired of seeing the Warriors. Or at least said they were. You saw them over and over and over again. But yet, people watched. People cared. Why? Because on the other side of the bracket was the greatest player of his generation. On the other side of the bracket was LeBron. And in LeBron, you had two things. One, greatness on the other side to perhaps offset the greatness from the Golden State Warriors. A worthy adversary, in a way, that would make you feel like there was a chance that the Warriors could go down. But it was also the level of greatness that LeBron was. I don't know. And we do appreciate greatness, and we do want to watch greatness, and you had it on display. You had the best player against the best team. I think this Super Bowl, if I were to compare it, this is Warriors-Raptors. This is a team that is historically great, arguably the greatest team ever assembled, going up essentially against one man who isn't the greatest we've ever seen, not the greatest of his generation, but it's like Saquon is Kawhi Leonard. Like he's on this insane run right now, and he's like a one-man wrecking crew, and you say through him maybe it's possible, but he's not. But Kawhi's not LeBron in a lot of different ways. But for that season, Kawhi was just about the best player walking planet Earth, and Saquon Barkley can make the same argument with what he is right now in the NFL. But it's not like if it were Bucks Chiefs, right? When Brady, if Brady was quarterbacking the Philadelphia Eagles, like we would have that same thing. And we kept tuning into Cleveland and Golden State. The numbers bear that out. People cared. People talked about it. Even though they wanted to see the Golden State Warriors lose, or they were said they were tired of seeing the Golden State Warriors, still tune in. Still get hyped up one way or another, in a good way or a bad way, about it. It just, It's just not the same. It's not the same feeling. And then you add perhaps on top of that we just saw this matchup. Ticket prices are down, have been down this week significantly to get in the game. Biggest reason why? A lot of the same people who want to go to this game just spent 6 months' salary on going to the game 2 years ago. They're just getting out of the financial hole they dug themselves by sending the whole family to go see Eagles Chiefs 2 years ago. So it's not one thing. It's never one thing. The first thing on the list is probably Chiefs fatigue. Or maybe, well, it's either Chiefs fatigue or it's the Luka trade. 1A, 1B, perhaps. But then you go down into it, and it's like, kind of saw this matchup a couple years before. There's not this star power on the other side across from the Kansas City Chiefs. There's not the LeBron James of football on the other side that would still make us compelled, even though we've seen this matchup before, to watch it again. It is just, and you could slice up the pie any way you want. But I think all of these are factors into how this has been as nondescript of a Super Bowl week and as oralist as a Super Bowl as we have seen in recent years. It's my read on it anyway. How about yours? Does it feel different this week? Is it just Luka? Is it just the Chiefs that is sapping your enthusiasm? Or do you think just overall this, I mean, we're all going to, the numbers are going to be phenomenal on Sunday. Okay. What else are you doing on Sunday? Right. But this week, the buildup has always been a part of it. We hype this thing up for 5 days during the week. And then Saturday, we're just racing through the day so we could get to Sunday and do everything and then sit down and watch the thing. And it's a very completely different buildup to this one as opposed to others. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Sean Payton says he wants a joker. I think there is one in this draft, but there's a slight problem if this joker is what's going to make the Denver Broncos a problem in 2025. It's been a Super Bowl week, perhaps unlike any other. Very little hype around this game on Sunday. I think that the Luka Doncic trade had a lot to do with it. I think it being a repeat, especially with the team on the AFC side, can make people feel like, yeah, I'm going to watch it, but I'm not going to exactly like live and breathe it for a whole 7 days. Very little aura around this Super Bowl, which you would think shouldn't be the case, considering that we may see something that we have never seen in the history of football on Sunday. But the team that's about to accomplish it is also part of the reason why there's little aura around this game. From the 719, the Super Bowl's lack of aura is because Buffalo got jobbed. The NFL and Referees Association claim all the talk about biased officiating is hogwash, yet the entire country saw the favoritism to Chief Scott. That's the problem. There's a book that I read recently. It's called Super Communicators. Pretty good read if you would ever like to check it out. And there's a part in that book, basically how to reason with those who are being unreasonable. Not saying you, the texter, but there are people out there that are being quite unreasonable when it comes to the NFL is rigged. There are people out there that really believe it, and they are pretty unreasonable people, right? The worst thing that you can do is scold them, right? People like that. And it doesn't have to be just with the Chiefs thing, but in anything, religion, politics, it doesn't matter. Over a movie, okay? If somebody is being unreasonable and their feeling is not based in reality, the worst thing you can do is scold them. And what you're saying about the NFL and the Referees Association, I understand, especially the Referees Association side of this, because their integrity is being attacked. And so I understand why they reacted the way they do, but you're not going to change anybody's mind if you basically tell an unreasonable person they are being unreasonable. Right? The worst way to win someone over to your side is not to go, you're crazy, here's why. Bad. Don't want to do that. What the NFL, Roger Goodell, and the Referees Association, if they actually wanted to try and affect as much change, because the fact of the matter is there are some people that it's like Inception, right? They just have this idea that is implanted in their head, and there's nothing you can do to get it out. That's the NFL is rigged for the Kansas City Chiefs crowd. That's not real. That's not true. It's not. And that's what the Referees Association was trying to explain. This idea that we could all be in cahoots to do this on an every week basis. You know how difficult it would be to carry out a conspiracy on that level with that many people changing out all the time. And they're right. But they basically start with, if you believe that the NFL is rigged, then you're an idiot. That's the tone that I got from both Roger Goodell and the Referees Association. You're never going to win anybody over. So I question what their motive was. Did they just want to shout people down and label them as idiots and move on? Or did they really want to try and show why you have to go to not the overall arching idea. You can't attack the idea that the NFL is rigged. If somebody believes the NFL is rigged, you're not going to be able to say, nuh-uh. You've gone in those arguments in your life, right? Nuh-uh, nuh-uh. You're never going to get anything done. You have to go into why the beliefs that they have underneath that umbrella belief and start to pick away at those things, and then eventually the whole thing comes crashing down. And they tried to do that a little bit after they basically said, you're an idiot. Just the tone, they came off all wrong. The best point that was made was we looked at every angle of Josh Allen on fourth down over and over and over again. And we still could not get to a majority who said for sure he was short or for sure he made it. Right? And that was my premise. I think Josh Allen got it. If you can say with 110% certainty that Josh Allen got that first down, then you have superhuman eyesight that nobody else has. You're a freaking superhero because nobody could tell unequivocally. And that's why the GPS and the football thing is such a no-brainer. But I felt like the NFL and the Referees Association just went about it the wrong way. And the tone that they had was basically, you're an idiot if you think that we're rigging it for the Kansas City Chiefs. And you're never going to convince anybody. You're never going to lower the temperature of a conversation if you start off with the tone or the actual words of you're an idiot. They needed to just put out. I would actually say that the Referees Association should not respond with anything other than here's what we saw or what we didn't see, and that's why we had to make this call. That's all that the referee should be doing. To do this whole thing of we have 100 and whatever referees and they only work games 2 a year and they only have the same team a couple of times, it just, your people's eyes are going to glaze over. What did you see or not see? You got together. You said you all got together. You got in a room and you watched it over and over and over again. What are your conclusions? Don't worry about that people think you're rigging it. Just tell us what you saw. Now, Roger Goodell may have to go a little bit at the narrative that the NFL is in the bag for the Chiefs and wants them to win. He probably has to go about that. Go after that a little bit. But I think even he came across entirely dismissive. And even though I'm sure Roger Goodell in his head is screaming that people actually believe this, he has to be more level-headed. He has to be more reasons-oriented and just say, I represent 32 owners. Okay? And all 32 owners have a deep desire to win a Super Bowl. So the idea that they would all come together and be okay with one team dominating their league for 20 years and then for another 7, there would be too many owners that would be against that. And maybe could have changed a few minds. You're not going to change it and I don't want to bring up recent events and veer off into a lane that I don't want to get into, but that kind of a crowd is very difficult to convince. There's just going to be people, and you have to live with it, that are just going to get this thought in their head. The Bills did infinitely more damage to themselves than the referees did. The Bills lost that game more than the referees handed the Chiefs that game. Like that's just the fact of the matter. But I do think that the texture is speaking to a real portion of the population. That the portion of the population feels this way. And that's part of the reason why they don't care about Sunday. Some people you just can't pull back onto your side, but there are some more reasonable people that I think that Roger Goodell and the Referees Association may have been able to win over, and they went about it all wrong. And they did not help themselves. But it's certainly part of it that people think that these calls are so egregious in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs that the very integrity of the sport is up for debate. That's part of it. Absolutely. But how big of a part of it is that? How much social media distorts our view of reality? Is it millions of people that believe that the NFL is rigged for the Chiefs? I don't think so. Is it hundreds of thousands? I don't think so. Is it thousands? Maybe. In a country of millions? Perhaps. And a lot of them are, on social media. Social media certainly forms a lot of our conversations. And if you see a bunch of people on social media on your For You feed that are talking about this, then it does influence a lot of people, even though it's a smaller portion of them. So that's absolutely part of the reason. But the question is that the reason? I don't think it is. And I think when the ratings come out for the Super Bowl on Monday, there are going to be millions upon millions of people who still tuned into that game. But the week leading up to it, I certainly think it has a bigger effect. 719-247-1313. Get to the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton wants himself a joker. If not Tyler Warren, then who? Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. Sean Payton did a really good interview yesterday with Kay Adams, touched on some of it yesterday, but there's a lot there. He was effusive in his praise for Marvin Mims. Apparently, he and Sean McVay and all of his Bronco quarterbacks went to Cabo together. Interesting. But the thing that is going to stick here, well, it's really two things, and it's the two things I talked about yesterday. The Broncos being a supposed problem in 2025. That's going to stay. That's going to be replayed. That's going to be brought back. T-shirts will be made. And then Sean Payton putting a joker above all else. They may need secondary help. They may need some depth on the defensive line. They may need wide receivers. But more than anything else, they need a joker. Alvin Kamara, Darren Sproles, Jimmy Graham. And those type of players are not wide receivers. They are tight ends and they are running backs because they have it's mostly a physical ability that is uncommon for their position group. You think about wide receivers, maybe a Tyreek Hill because of the different ways that you can line him up and the different thing, Deebo Samuel. But in the wide receiving position, there's just not that many of them. They're running backs and they're tight ends because you could create mismatches that way. That's what Sean Payton is after, right? Creating mismatches. I think everybody is on the same page that the player in this draft that most exemplifies what Sean Payton would be looking for is Tyler Warren of Penn State. There are three problems, actually, with Tyler Warren. One, Broncos are not the number one pick. There are a lot of teams that come up before them, and I'm sure a few of them are salivating over Tyler Warren's skill set just like Sean Payton is. Okay, so that's impediment number one. Impediment number two is that even if they get Tyler Warren, which would be great, A+ grade, the other side of this joker position that is maybe not talked about as much is the fact that it's a very cerebral position. In that you don't just have to know how to play your position, you also have to know how to do a lot of other things, right? If you're a tight end, you got to know when you're splitting out wide, all those other, and we talked about this for much of the year with Bo Nix and some of his young weapons on getting on the same page and learning the playbook and everything. Tyler Warren is going to be a rookie, which already is a position that you need to be patient with, right? He may not pick up everything in Sean Payton's offense immediately, and that's going to be the interesting thing when Tyler Warren and Sean Payton sit down. Does Tyler Warren have the football IQ that Bo Nix does? I'm not saying he doesn't. I don't know. And I don't think Sean Payton knows. So rookies are drinking out of a fire hose. And that's a scaled down version of the playbook. That's a very specific role that you are playing. Now, if you are going to do this other thing, you're a tight end that's going to line out wide. If you're a running back, that's now going to line up in the slot. If you're going to go out for passes, you got to think of that stuff as opposed to just, I got to hit the A gap or the B gap or the C gap. To put all of that on the plate of a rookie I can foresee it being a bit problematic. Now, what that means is that Tyler Warren could be the future joker of the Denver Broncos. And maybe he has a football IQ that even surpasses Bo Nix, and he picks all this stuff up easily, and he immediately can be that guy. But I think a reasonable, because be honest with yourselves, Broncos fan, you are a little bit quick to heap pressure on and expectation onto a young player. And you are not alone. Many other fan bases do this. But the one type of player that deserves a little bit of patience is a rookie. And if Sean Payton is telling Kay Adams, that's the one thing I must have, with the idea that you want me to knock off the Chiefs, you want to win the division, you want to go to a Super Bowl, I need a joker. And then they draft Tyler Warren, and then everyone expects him to be that dude day one. We got to go. Sean Payton promised to dethrone the Chiefs, promised to win the AFC West. They're going to be a problem. You can't wait for Tyler Warren's development. So it could end up being a little problematic that Tyler Warren would step in to a Broncos team with perhaps more expectation than Bo Nix did. And that could break a young player. Again, I don't know Tyler Warren's makeup. But Sean Payton, George Payton, they're going to find out his makeup and see if he can handle it. Everything that comes along with that, including the fact that Sean Payton is basically holding up this joker as the missing piece to the puzzle to get the Denver Broncos back to the promised land. I think you also have to consider that Sean Payton is going to be looking for a veteran to fill this role. And I think that would actually be his preference. Right? His preference. He's not telling Kay Adams that with the idea, I'm going to draft Tyler Warren and he's going to be my joker. He doesn't even know Tyler Warren that well yet. I think when he sees Tyler Warren, when he watches tape, when he's going to see the same things that you and I see, but how much of Tyler Warren has Sean Payton seen? He hasn't gone to talk to him, hasn't gone to scout him. I think the long-term dream of the next great Broncos team is Bo Nix a few years down the road throwing to Tyler Warren, the joker of the Denver Broncos, a few years down the road. And you can have dreams of Drew Brees and Jimmy Graham, or make it more localized in the AFC West, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, like that kind of a relationship. Maybe it can grow into that one day. That's the hope. That's the dream. And I'm sure Sean Payton will have some of those same thoughts when he scouts Tyler Warren. But he's putting the Broncos on the line now. He's throwing down the gauntlet now for this upcoming season. Can he wait for the development of a rookie into that role? I don't think he can. So the question becomes, how does he find that person right now that can handle all of it right now? The joker position, when you look at Darren Sproles, Alvin Kamara, Reggie Bush, Jimmy Graham, right? The players that have filled that role in the past that Sean Payton has talked about at length. One thing that they all have in common, different positions, all that kind of stuff. One number that kind of ties them all together is their receptions. They all had about 5 catches a game, right? Well, right. I have the numbers in front of me. About 5 catches a game. It's a lot of catches. It's a lot of work. Think about some of the games where Cortland Sutton had none catches and Marvin Mims didn't even get on the field and Troy Franklin didn't appear for 3 straight weeks. And Sean Payton is essentially saying, I need a guy that can catch me 5 balls every single week. Do you know the number of players at the tight end or running back position that did that this year? It is 8 players long. Out of the entire National Football League, 8 dudes did what Sean Payton requires from his joker. The list, and keep in mind as I'm reading these names, how many of them could be available to the Denver Broncos. Trey McBride, former Ram. Brock Bowers. Travis Kelce. David Njoku. Jonnu Smith. George Kittle. Devon Achane. And Alvin Kamara. Last one was quite obvious, wasn't it? That's the list of the guys who have done this year what Sean Payton requires from a joker. How many of those guys do the Broncos have any chance at acquiring? Not Trey McBride. They love him in Arizona. Travis Kelce, please. Brock Bowers, could have had him. David Njoku, remember we all talked about how great David Njoku would be with the Broncos? What's going to be his future? Maybe he's available, maybe he's not. Jonnu Smith, gettable. George Kittle, not. Achane, not. Kamara, not. So David Njoku, maybe potentially. Who knows? I don't know what the Browns are going to do. Are they going to tear it down, or are they going to try and just survive and make sure that Njoku's there for whatever quarterback succeeds Deshaun Watson? Because I could see that. But does Myles Garrett bring this whole franchise and turns them into rubble? I don't know. We'll have to see. But they couldn't get him at the trade deadline. So the list is Jonnu Smith. Maybe he's one. I'll throw in another. 2 years ago, there was a player that would satisfy the requirements to catch at least 5 passes a game. Evan Ingram. If you're looking for somebody that has the chance to be available, that could fit that role, at least in the short term, and then if you're a Broncos fan, you hope that they draft Tyler Warren and long-term he can be that guy. But if the Broncos are putting it on the line this year, they need a veteran right now who could do what Sean Payton requires. And that guy, to me, that I looking all over this, Evan Ingram 2 years ago did exactly what Sean Payton would need. Put that name on your list for the Denver Broncos. Evan Ingram. Last year was not a good year for him. Missed a ton of games, was not productive. But perhaps that could be the guy that Sean Payton and George Payton will target to play that role. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show. And Nikola Jokic has the opposite message of Dennis Schroeder when it comes to being traded in the NBA. Hello there. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Thursday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate your patronage, whether you're listening to the show on air, online, or through the new Extra Sports 1300 app, which is 100% free to download and use, and is sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and well-being for all. Coming up tonight, Avs looking for the bounce back as they take on their old friend Nazem Kadri and the Calgary Flames. Puck drop is at 7 o'clock right here on Extra Sports 1300. If you would like to get your say in on the day's topics, please do. 719-247 1313. Here are three topics that may tickle your fancy. We call it What's Driving the Show. All right. Story number one has no audio attached to it. You know why? Because doing nothing does not make a sound. And that's exactly what the Denver Nuggets did today. Nothing. The NBA trade deadline, one of the more talked about trade deadlines in recent memory. Everyone getting in on the action except for four teams. And one of those four teams is the Denver Nuggets. Now they can't even truly participate in the buyout market, which, look, I threw out Ben Simmons the other day and was, I had eggs thrown at me. So I think that there's a world where the Nuggets do nothing at the trade deadline, which they did. The buyout market comes along and everyone kind of looks at it and goes, yeah, I don't know that any of these guys are that good. Now, that's down the road, right? We have to see who's going to get bought out and everything. So there's a chance that you look at the buyout market and you go, yeah, I don't know that any of those guys are really going to help the Denver Nuggets. I suppose that what was the point of making a deal? But that's an alternate world. Because the worst thing to happen to Calvin Booth this trade deadline was not Luka to the Lakers, wasn't Anthony Davis to the Mavericks. It was Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors. Why? Because in exchange for Brandon Ingram, the New Orleans Pelicans, who are firmly in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, do not want to really win games, acquired Bruce Brown. The significance of that, there is a good chance that Bruce Brown is going to be bought out. And one of the guys that has been lost by Calvin Booth over the last 2 years would be available for pennies on the dollar. But unfortunately, the Denver Nuggets have no pennies. They have no dollars because they were unable to move anyone at the trade deadline. If Bruce Brown gets bought out, Calvin Booth is going to have a really, really bad day. Right now, probably not a good day. The day that Bruce Brown is bought out and people realize that the Denver Nuggets, even if they waive a player, just outright release him to open up the roster spot, they still can't sign Bruce Brown, that will be a much worse day. The worst thing to happen to Calvin Booth was that Brandon Ingram trade where Bruce Brown now looks to be a prime candidate to get bought out. And there would be a player on the buyout market that most Nuggets fans would agree could help them. This is the reality that Calvin Booth has built for himself. He, as a general manager, very much was promoted to third base. He started his general manager job on third base. Tim Connolly did all the work. All he had to do was bring it home, and he did with Bruce Brown and Contavious Caldwell-Pope, and people around here thought, you know what? Tim Connolly to Calvin Booth, easy transition, going forward. Here comes the dynasty. And what has Calvin Booth done since? He was able to knock in finish the job, put whatever other sports analogy you want to put in there, tap it in the gimme that Tim Connolly set up for him, and everything since then, he has been sapping talent off of this roster over these last couple of years and is so boxed in by these decisions that he could not even dump one of his unwanted players on the Charlotte Hornets. And the Charlotte Hornets apparently are willing to take on anybody. They just acquired Yusuf Nurkic today. They couldn't even do that. And the question becomes, like Calvin Booth was able to bring it home starting on third base, is there somebody who is better equipped to rebuild this thing around Nikola Jokic? I think the playoffs and playoff Jamal are going to be the ultimate decider of Calvin Booth's fate. Story number 2, also out of the NBA. The rest of the league participated in the NBA trade deadline. Well, I shouldn't say the rest of the league. Minnesota didn't make a trade. Portland didn't make a trade. And I believe Orlando, was that the other team, did not make a trade. But the rest of the league did. And outside of the Luka Doncic trade, the most notable trade that has happened in the NBA is maybe the worst one. And it's Jimmy Butler going to the Golden State Warriors. And I ask, not for you to put down your pitchforks as you march on Ball Arena, but just think about it. What is worse? Not doing anything or doing what the Warriors did? Because the Warriors were a desperate team that did a very desperate thing. And it will bring, like, you know, in Thor Ragnarok, you know, remember what Ragnarok is? They put the horn helmet on the eternal flame and this big fire monster came out and destroyed Thor's homeworld. That's Jimmy Butler. The Golden State Warriors have built up a utopia. Well, not a utopia. I mean, Draymond Green did punch Jordan Poole in the face, so it hasn't been perfect. But the Warriors have built a modern-day dynasty, and some of the remnants are still there. And what they have done is brought on somebody who will burn it to the ground. And the Golden State Warriors, as you remember them, will be no more. And they will have to start again. Jimmy Butler, and it's not going to happen right away. Okay, so don't call me after Jimmy Butler's first 30-point game in his debut and say, looks like Jimmy Butler's fitting in well. It will take time. Jimmy Butler got traded, and Jimmy Butler got paid. That will buy his cooperation for a little bit. Maybe even the rest of this season. And Golden State will see a minor uptick in their standing. Maybe they get out of the play-in instead of losing in the play-in. But then there will be a whole offseason where Jimmy will stew. And Jimmy likes to stew when Jimmy's not in the spotlight. It's Steph Curry's team. And if it's not Steph's team, it might be Draymond's team. Jimmy hates to not have the spotlight. And Jimmy's going to get resentful. And Jimmy's going to look at his contract and say, Jimmy doesn't like this. Jimmy's not paid enough. Jimmy doesn't have enough security. And he's going to become a problem. And you saw it on the face of Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr looked like somebody popped his balloon because he now has to deal with Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler in the same organization. No person deserves that, especially somebody as good as Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is a good guy who does not deserve this. And last night at the podium, it was a man who is realizing that he is going to morph into a babysitter for the rest of his days coaching the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors got desperate, and in desperation, you make bad decisions, and they made the worst decision outside of trading Luka Doncic. Congratulations, Mavericks. They haven't surpassed you, Mavericks. You're still number one on the list, but you have company. And it's the Golden State Warriors. The worst move outside of trading Luka Doncic, by far. Jimmy Butler will bring on Ragnarok in San Francisco. And to finish it out with story number 3, sticking with the National Basketball Association. For those of you who observe the All-Star festivities, the teams have been picked. Do you want to know who Nikola Jokic is playing with? Even if you're not going to watch, I think you're going to want to know who his teammates are. He will be on Team Chuck because, you know, they're drafting Chuck, Kenny, Shaq, and then they're getting, I think, the Bronny James All-Stars together, a bunch of G League guys. Or no, I'm sorry. It's the winner of the Rising Stars. So either the rookies or the sophomores, if that's still the format. The winner of the Rising Stars game will be coached, I think, by Candace Parker. But Shaq, Kenny, and Chuck picked teams. And they will play in like a tournament-style format. It's probably going to be terrible. But it is of note that Jokic goes to Chuck, who is better than Shaq or Kenny. If I were to pick what team Jokic goes to, I'd want him to be on Charles Barkley's team. Here is the rest of Team Chuck. Giannis, Shea, Wemby, Siakam, Şengün, Cat, and Donovan Mitchell. Team Shaq is all the old heads. LeBron, Steph, AD. That might be awkward. Durant, Jason Tatum, who pretends to be some of those older guys. Damian Lillard, James Harden are on Team Shaq. So Team Shaq's got the older guys. Team Chuck has a lot of foreign guys and a lot of big guys. And then Kenny has Edwards, Brunson, Triple J, Jalen Williams of the Thunder, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, and Tyler Hero. So Shaq has the old guys. Kenny has the worst team, and Chuck has the best team. Jokic, Giannis, Shea, Wemby, Siakam, Şengün, Cat, and Donovan Mitchell. I may have to amend my plans for that weekend. I may watch. That team that Chuck has put together is awesome. You could play a lineup with Shea, Jokic, Giannis, Wemby, and Cat. And if you don't like one of them, you could put in Alperen Şengün. He has 2 guards, Shea and Donovan Mitchell. and all the league's preeminent big man and Pascal Siakam. I don't know what group Siakam. I like Pascal Siakam. I may watch. That's a good team. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. The NBA trade deadline has come and gone. You may recall what Dennis Schroeder compared the trade deadline to, which certainly raised some eyebrows. Nikola Jokic has a very different take on the trade deadline. I will present both of their takes to you, and you can decide which one is more sane. So Dennis Schroeder was asked about his feelings on the trade deadline. Of course, the Luka trade sent shockwaves throughout the NBA, and even Nikola Jokic said this. It didn't feel like anybody was safe, right? If Luka could get traded, then anybody could. So it's jarring, the effect the Luka trade had across the NBA. And there are a couple different ways to react to it. You could be very emotional and say something incredibly stupid, or you could understand the gravity of it, but still give a pretty smart, measured response. Exhibit A, I'll let you put Dennis Schroeder into whichever column you would like. Dennis Schroeder likened the NBA trade deadline to slavery. Yep, because as we know, one, that's definitely something that you should reference when ever possible. It's always good to make a comparison to one of the great atrocities of our world's history, right? That's always a good plan. That's going to get a lot of people on your side. That's going to make you seem like a level-headed person. And also I do remember reading somewhere that even though that millions of dollars were paid to those people back then. I do remember that. So good job, Dennis Schroeder. And your punishment, the punishment really fits the crime because now he's playing for the Utah Jazz. So really, karma. He gets dealt and he has to go to the NBA's version of Siberia, which is Utah. And yeah, but he'll probably get bought out. Then there's Nikola Jokic. And I don't know why Nikola Jokic has to do everything for everyone at all times. For the Denver Nuggets, he talked about this last night after the Pelicans game, where he scored, by the way, scored almost 40 points and was overshadowed. How many nights is Nikola Jokic getting overshadowed? That's the kind of night Michael Porter had. Nikola Jokic is saying that he changed up his shot and why he's so efficient now shooting three-pointers. So the Denver Nuggets do nothing to add three-point shooting. In fact, they subtract three-point shooting by letting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. And the guy who takes it upon himself to fix that is Nikola Jokic. That's the guy that's like, you know what? I got to make more threes. I'm going to get in the lab. Like, why does that fall on him? Why does he have to do that? Maybe Jamal Murray can be bothered to take more than 7 shots in a basketball game. I mean, he's being paid enough. He should be getting paid by the shot. He should take about 50 shots a game. So Nikola Jokic has to be the Nuggets' answer to their three-point shooting problems because it's Porter and it's nobody else. So Jokic is like, okay, I'll do it. Unfair, but that's the reality that Nikola Jokic is living in. And then he has to be the voice of reason when everybody in the NBA is acting like they are big victims in all of this. And one is comparing being able to trade players in the NBA to slavery. Nikola Jokic last night said, quote, "We sign a contract, you get traded. I think it's be professional. Don't close the door behind you if you get traded." Wow. Opposite ends of the spectrum, no? I mean, you just have to keep this in mind. I'm not saying there's not a real human impact here to have to move across the country and all this kind of stuff. And I think everybody at least understands that. But many NBA players, not all, many NBA players can afford to, and I don't want to make this about, millionaires against us common folk, but I'm just saying, like, a move like this across the country is difficult. There's no doubt about that. And it impacts these players' lives. But also it's what they signed up for. They get a lot of other perks that may offset that. Like, I don't even feel like why am I even going down this road? It's only because Dennis Schroeder said something incredibly stupid and insensitive. And I had to compare it to what Nikola Jokic said because that's the attitude you should have. I would add one other thing to it. I think it's be professional. Don't close the door behind you if you get traded, and eviscerate that team that traded you the next time you play. That's one of the great joys of sports, the revenge game. You get traded, circle the date on the calendar when you play them again, and you destroy them. We know there's real world impact. But if you're looking for like a deep level of sympathy, Dennis Schroeder, sorry, you're not going to get it. It's the way that the league has worked before you. It's the way that's worked after, and it is not illegal. It is not immoral. You know, I'm thinking about this with Nikola Jokic. And again, I understand the situation that Calvin Booth finds himself in. I get why they didn't make a deal at the deadline. Would you like Dario Saric? Dude can't even get on the court in a 30-point blowout. You want Zeke Naji? Oh, you weren't completely 100% sold on the superstardom that Zeke Naji was in for after he had 2 good games, wait for it, in a row? That didn't convince you that you wanted to take on a $9 million salary just for nothing? I understand why Calvin Booth is in the position that he's in. I think it's a prison of his own creation in many ways. But I also wonder this. Are the Nuggets taking advantage of Nikola Jokic? So much of the conversation around what the Nuggets should and should not do is based around the premise that you have a generational talent, the best player in the league. You owe it to him to do everything you can to put a contender around him. And this is kind of an offshoot of that. But I wonder if Nikola Jokic conducted himself more, not exactly like Jimmy Butler, but let's say more like Jimmy Butler. Okay, if he acted the way that so many NBA stars have acted over the years, making demands, threatening them to say, you got to trade me, even going so far as to say, I need you to trade me and I'm only going here, like all this kind of stuff. You know, I think of a recent example. Well, the most recent example is Jimmy Butler. The man acted like a child throwing a temper tantrum when Pat Riley would not give him what he wanted. He got suspended multiple times. He intentionally missed a team flight. He left the arena after Eric Spoelstra had the unmitigated gall to leave him out of the starting lineup, as if Miami is just supposed to keep Jimmy Butler and hold him in the high regard and let him do whatever he wants and keep him in the starting lineup and can't even possibly think of a life without him until he's actually gone. God forbid that the Miami Heat would say, let's do a different look for like post Jimmy, like give it a see how these guys fit. Oh, no, you can't do that. And Jimmy Butler storms out. And you know what the moral of the story is, kids? Act exactly like Jimmy Butler. He didn't get to go to Phoenix. Tier. But he got traded. He got his $100+ million extension. And here's Nikola Jokic. His message to NBA, it's not his message to NBA players, but the way he would handle a situation if he were to get traded would be to act professional. And he doesn't complain. And when Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette asks him if he has everything he needs to win a title, he unequivocally and without hesitation says yes, even interrupts the question to say yes, not even a beat to leave some doubt. That's how Nikola Jokic conducts himself, and this organization continues to hemorrhage talent, to do nothing at the trade deadline, to box themselves in even further by signing multiple large contract extensions this summer. I'm not saying all of these things are wrong, but I'm saying all of these things are leading the Denver Nuggets to not be able to improve, right? We can at least agree on that. Maybe you want Jamal Murray here long-term. Maybe you want Aaron Gordon here long-term, but you know that would make them more hampered when it comes to the trade deadline. You know they can't improve. They can't add. There's less of a chance for them to add to their team if they sign those guys to extensions. You know, we had a star like this in Colorado before, not like Nikola Jokic, like so many other stars. His name was Carmelo Anthony. Right? He said, trade me. He tried to pigeonhole the Nuggets into trading him to one team, which they obliged. And only through the grace of James Dolan did the Nuggets survive the Carmelo Anthony trade. But what does it say when Nikola Jokic acts, and I've always called him the anti-superstar in the NBA, and he's showing that again. While Jimmy Butler is throwing a temper tantrum, Nikola Jokic is saying, I'm happy where I am. I believe this team has everything it needs to win a title. I am unwavering in my belief. And if I were to ever be traded, I would act like a professional. It's so different. But yet, what yields results is acting the way that Jimmy Butler does. Giannis, when he passive-aggressively talked to the New York Times, scared the bejesus out of the Milwaukee Bucks into making the Damian Lillard trade for fear of losing him. Now, as far as sins go on NBA superstars, that's pretty tame. Anthony Davis sat out games. Jimmy Butler stormed out of the arena. Paul George took Oklahoma City's money and then a year later turned around and demanded a trade. Like, Giannis just passive-aggressively openly pondering the future and getting the Bucks to get Damian Lillard. It certainly doesn't rise to the level, but you see all these other stars get rewarded for behavior that is less professional than what Nikola Jokic does, and yet, who deserves to get their way? Nikola Jokic knows that this team can be better, that they could reasonably add something to the mix to be a better basketball team. But he doesn't want to act like these other stars. Right? There's no doubt Nikola Jokic looks at this basketball team and says, we're missing something. Sure, I would like to get player X, or I'd like to add more shooting or more defense. He knows that. But what good, in his mind, what good does it do? And what I'm saying is it actually does a lot of good, Nikola. it feels like, and I'm not entirely sure that we don't see this happening across the hallway with Nathan McKinnon. You just wonder with these stars that aren't going to get involved in front office decisions and are always going to be professional and always play their hardest and everything like that and always say the right things. You wonder if these organizations take advantage of them. Because Nikola Jokic isn't going to storm into Calvin Booth's office and say, why didn't you make a trade for Kevin Durant? And I wonder sometimes if you don't have to go to Jimmy Butler extremes, but I wonder if it is good on occasion to kind of turn up the heat a little bit, to use the leverage you have as a superstar to spur action. Or at least bring forth some sort of a plan. I'm not entirely sure what the Nuggets' grand plan here is. Are they just going to keep losing players until there's nobody left? Sign the ones up that they can? And then the ones that they can't, they just keep letting them go by the wayside? Doesn't look like it's working. And I think this conversation is going to continue into the summer, because if the Denver Nuggets fail to get to where they need to go, and at the very least it's the Western Conference Finals, right? Can we at least agree anything short of playing Oklahoma City in the Western Conference Final is a failure? Sorry, Giannis, it is a failure. Can we at least agree on that? What if they fall short? Then some really difficult decisions will be made. You think Calvin Booth's job is hard now, trying to unload Zeke Naji? How about trying to figure out a way that you can sell low on Jamal Murray when you just locked him up to one of the most lucrative contracts in the NBA and you can't get back equal value? And we say all the time, don't take for granted what you're seeing with Nikola Jokic, the greatness that you get to witness on an every night basis. But I would apply that to the organization as well. Don't take for granted what you have in Nikola Jokic, because you could look at about 25 other teams that are pulling their hair out dealing with their superstar. 719-24-7. 13-13. Take one last break. Oh, Rob Manfred want to get in the mix. All this attention on Roger Goodell and Adam Silver's leagues this week. He wants a little of attention, so let's do it. Rob Manfred says, this is on ESPN, some MLB fans concerned about the lack of a salary cap. I wonder what team is bringing on these concerns. Are you? Get into it next. Rob Manfred trying to weasel his way into the sports conversation these days. A week that's been dominated by Adam Silver's league, normally reserved for Roger Goodell's league, and now here's Rob Manfred speaking up, saying, what about us? Trying to make some noise. Headline on ESPN. Rob Manfred says some MLB fans concerned about the lack of a salary cap. This, of course, in reference to the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have become the new evil empire, and they are perhaps several empires built into one. Which was bigger, the Ottoman Empire or the Roman Empire? The Yankees were the smaller one. The Dodgers they're like all of Westeros. They get Roki Sasaki. After they get Shohei Ohtani, they defer this money. They find loopholes to be able to build a closest thing baseball has seen to a super team. They sign dudes just for fun. And while Manfred says MLB fans are concerned about it, I know what Roger Goodell or Rob Manfred is doing. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. These are the first words. And you can mark mine. MLB is going to come up with a salary cap. I don't know if it's a year from now. I don't know if it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That has now become the number one agenda item for Rob Manfred and MLB owners. And they will use you as a pawn. Don't let them do it. Oh, but having a salary cap will prevent dynasties. Oh, remind me again what the last 30 years of the NFL has been. They have a salary cap. They ain't preventing diddly poo. We just handed that league from one dynasty to the next. Oh, but it will allow teams to keep their own players, right? Team won't buy up all the players. Oh, remind me again what team Luka Doncic plays for now. And the reason why is because in a closest thing you're going to get to a hard salary cap league, which the NBA has become, the Dallas Mavericks were deathly afraid of paying Luka Doncic that much money, so they traded him a year before they even had to consider it and made one of the worst trades in the history of that league because they're scared to death of their salary cap. There is no correlation between the health of a sport and having a salary cap. That's not why the NFL is king, because as a salary cap, no. It's not. And they don't even have the parity that they claim they do. We're on the verge of a team three-peating, coming off 20 years of the New England Patriots. Don't tell me that MLB having a salary cap is going to prevent the Dodgers from being part of the reason why the Dodgers are becoming a dynasty is because they took a guy who is confounding everyone in Andrew Friedman. Right? He had these Rays. They're basically have the resources of a high single A team. And yet he's going toe-to-toe with the Red Sox and Yankees every year. How is this possible? And what the Dodgers said was, we want you to do what you do in Tampa, in LA, and we'll give you a blank check to do it. The Dodgers do run themselves on a lot of the same principles the Rays had. They are very good scouting. They are good at developing. They do find value where others don't. It's just that to ensure that they get the player that they want, they'll pay him more than anybody else can. But they are run by the same principles Andrew Friedman had all those years ago in Tampa. And they also have a blank check. They're a smart franchise with an unlimited payroll. But the idea that having a salary cap will suddenly fix Major League Baseball and people will flock back to the ballparks and will start watching again, it's nonsense. One of the world's most popular leagues outside the NFL is the Premier League, where there are about 3 teams that buy up every single player that is available. And yet those stadiums are packed. Television is so good that now they have it here in the United States and we watch it. They have just as great of an imbalance between the haves and the have-nots as Major League Baseball does. Having a salary cap is just a cost control measure for owners. It's just so they don't have to pay. That's what it is. Franchise valuations are skyrocketing. You got to pay billions of dollars now to own a sports franchise. You don't want to then spend billions of dollars in salary. Unless you have about 8 million or billionaires like the Dodgers do. And then you're willing to do that. But even then, they have to do the deferment crap. Right? They got to do the deferments. Even the Dodgers cannot actually afford the players that they are signing. They're using loopholes. But this is, I'm telling you, I know it when I see it. This is Rob Manfred laying the groundwork, saying you, the fan, are concerned about the lack of a salary cap. And we are going to act on your behalf. We are tired of the imbalance in competitive nature. We're calling the Dodgers the evil empire in a dynasty. They've won twice in 5 years. Right? Is my math right? Like there's a team going for a three-peat on Sunday. I don't think Major League Baseball has the problem that they think they do. And I actually think for a league that continues to decline in popularity and becomes more of an afterthought, a team like the Dodgers that you can tune in and see megastar followed by megastar followed by megastar followed by the next big thing is actually kind of good for the league. And they got the World Series that they wanted. It's just that the Dodgers were that much better. So that was a little disappointing. But everyone was pretty stoked about the Dodgers and the Yankees going into it, weren't they? And think about the other teams that, like Atlanta. Atlanta can compete. They were just hurt this year. Look at what the Mets are doing. Little brothers in New York now have Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, and they just signed Pete Alonso. There are enough halves in Major League Baseball to carry that product. This idea that they need to level the playing field. Trust me, the Rockies will still be garbage. It's not a money thing with them. They just signed Chris Bryant. Okay, they paid him a lot of money. It's not about the money. but they're going to make it about the money because they see what's going on in the NBA and the NHL and the NFL, and they're talking to their fellow owner buddies, and they are so jealous. They are so jealous that they don't have the control over the athletes that these other leagues do, that they can't cost control their payrolls the way they can without getting publicly shamed. Because they can, and many of them do, but they are burned in effigy. They want what these other leagues have. And it's just an excuse. Don't let them do it. A salary cap will not make the league better. Look at the NBA. Their new salary cap with this second apron is ruining their league. Ruining it. Telling you, this is where it's going. That'll be it for me. Appreciate your patronage tonight, 7 o'clock, Avs and Flames. And we'll reconvene tomorrow at 3. Enjoy your evening.